Okay, chapter 16, the transformation of the West, 1450 to 1750. We'll be looking at the first big changes in culture and commerce. We'll be looking at science and politics, also a little bit with the Reformation, and we'll be looking at the West by 1750. Chapter 16 and 17 flow together as we did the Salon Project and discussing those things. Here's an image of it. It's a painting of a salon where you would have the people gather together. You would also have food, conversation. They would be held at some of the upper class residence. The first big changes, culture and commerce. A new spirit, all right? You're going to have secular rising that emerges, Petrarch, 1304 to 1374. A lot of these writings are going to begin in Italy. A lot of your movements begin in Italy. We've talked about this before with banking and commerce, and so they're having the money to support the arts. The Italian Renaissance begins between the 14th and 15th centuries in northern Italy. And Italy is going to become extremely urbanized, so people moving to your city areas. Merchant classes are going to emerge. Again, they're becoming dominant in the Mediterranean during this time period. And they will have some political rivalry. They will end up getting control once some of the Muslim ships are defeated. And they will also have some control with their city-states along the Italian peninsula and even over in Anatolia, where present-day Turkey is located. Paintings, you're also going to see perspective, shadow, distance, focus on humans. So even the arts starting to change here. The upper class getting involved in a lot of this, wanting paintings of themselves, wanting portraits, wanting landscapes. And again, looking a little bit more detail with distance, shadow, the perspective, the horizon line in the distance. Here's a present or a map during this time period of the Renaissance and Reformation. I would make sure you have an understanding of how Europe is slowly changing and how these boundaries are adapting. It'll be important if you see a map on the AP exam. The Italian Renaissance, again, we're going to have some key people. You probably won't see a question asking specifically what a person did, but I would have knowledge of some of the artists, at least so you can recall them maybe for an essay. Humanism, a huge part of the Italian Renaissance. It's looking back to the classical past, study of text, especially the ancients with the Romans and the Greeks. It's going to be taking the human nature view of it, taking religion out, adding that nature and science view of humans and their triumph and their glory and what they can do. The Renaissance moves northward. By 1500, it's going to move into France, the Low Countries, England, Germany, thence to Eastern Europe. And it's going to focus more on religion with the sciences and with the arts. You'll have William Shakespeare, Cervantes, and those will be some of your more popular people in the Northern Renaissance area, especially England. Hold on 1 second. All right, the first big changes in culture and commerce and technology. You're going to get the printing press. This is probably going to be one of the biggest changes during this time period. It's what's going to spread the information. It's what's going to allow the people in the salons to be able to know what is occurring and discuss the issues of science, of art, of literature, of religion. So the changes that are occurring are starting to spread throughout, and we'll later see on that the literacy rate's going to increase as well, which is going to improve education here. Family, it's going to be a later marriage age, and so you're looking at your later 20s, probably 28, 29, 30. The nuclear family, so it's just your close family. You're not having a big, large, extended family like you had seen before, so a lot closer to what it is today. The Protestant and Catholic Reformation, 1517, Martin Luther's challenge attacks the church institutions. The Bible is the only authority, and vernacular translations. And so he staples the 95 Thesis on the door in Germany of the Catholic Church, and that will begin your Protestant Reformation. So the separation in your denominations is going to begin today. A lot of you probably come from multiple denominations, each one of you in the classroom probably something different than somebody else, and you can stem a lot of this back to this beginning point of the Protestant Reformation. Protestant protest used for political gain in a lot of these areas. So sometimes it wasn't just religion. Sometimes they were also over political territories, gaining statehood, also gaining some other freedoms that they were wanting politically. German opposition to the papacy, so opposing the Pope in this area, and we'll later see that they're going to allow the regions within Germany to choose whether they are Protestant or whether they are Catholic. Rulers seized church lands, so this was another opportunity to gain land that the Catholic Church had, which before wasn't being able to be taxed. Henry VIII establishes the Anglican Church in England. This is, of course, because he wants to divorce. Henry VIII, there's the cheesy little song that goes along with it with his multitude of wives that he has. So really it was over marriage than anything else. Jean Calvin begins Calvinism, and you're going to have the discussion of predestination and free will versus predestination and what God has in store for people's lives. And so that becomes a huge topic during this time period. But the Catholics are also going to notice that there's a lot of change. They're losing a lot of their members. And so they look internally at themselves as well for some of this, and they bring about a renewal. They're going to have the Jesuits, which are missionaries, and they're also going to bring about education. So they're going to change some of their, not necessarily how strict they were, but some of their traditions and maybe some of their beliefs that they had to bring that to a more modern state at that time period. The end of Christian unity in the West, you're going to have religious wars. In France, you'll have the Calvinists versus the Catholics. In 1598, you'll have the Edict of Nantes, and it promises Protestant toleration. This is where you're going to be able to have people choosing their religion that they, or their denomination that they want. 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, it's going to devastate Germany. And the Netherlands are going to become independent. Remember, the Netherlands is the Dutch, Holland, Netherlands, all the same. Literacy rate increases, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to start to lead into the commercial revolution. So all of this is kind of combined all into one category. You're going to have Renaissance, agriculture, or science, agriculture, Reformation, and trade, and expansion, all kind of clumped together in this few hundred years right here from 1450 to 1750. All of this gets put together. So gold, silver from the New World, demand outstrips the supply. So again, you're having some inflation here. So it's not being worth as much. It's also starting to shift around. A lot of your silver is going to go to Asia. Spain and Portugal are going to slowly start to lose out because they don't have the banking and they don't have the supplies to build their own things, and so they're going to start to lose out a little bit here. Social protest, proletariat develops, attitudes towards the poor change, protest, and witchcraft is going to become a hysteria. Couldn't see the word. Again, another map. I would understand the development that is occurring over this 300-year span. Copernicus, did he copy or not? This is important because this is going to show where a lot of the knowledge from the Middle East had started to seep into Europe, and it's kind of debatable, did some of these copy or did some of them at least add on to or change a little bit of what was gathered from the Middle East. He was a polished monk. And it was, did he copy from the early Arab scientists and some of their views? Science, the new authority, new instruments add to data collection. This is important to understand what Galileo, Kepler, Harvey, a lot of the sciences that are going to develop during this time period. There probably won't be a specific question about like what did this person do, but there might be something about the sciences and what changed and how they disproved some of the ancient theories and thoughts during that time period. Methods, you have Francis Bacon, Rene Descartes, Isaac Newton, deism, God does not intervene with the nature, and of course John Locke and then Hobbes and their views on reason and nature and whether people are good or evil, and so that will become a debate. And a lot of the things that are going to occur during this time period also are going to influence some revolutions later on. Absolute and parliamentary monarchs, I would definitely know this. I wouldn't be surprised to see some question on the AP exam with this. 17th century, medieval balance disrupted. France is going to dominate during this time period. You'll have a centralized monarchy and a bureaucracy, and evidently you'll end up with an absolute monarchy. This will be seen in Louis XIV. Best example is he brings the nobles to the courts at Versailles. Other absolute monarchs, Spain, Prussia, Austria-Hungary. You'll have some territorial expansion. Prussia, I don't think I showed it to every class, but I would make sure you have an understanding that Prussia is kind of a little bit into Germany, into Poland, into some of the Eastern Europe countries that break off from Russia later on in the 90s, and parts of Russia up in here. It's actually fairly large. England, it's going to have a difference. They're going to have a civil war. They'll still have the king. They'll still have some power, but they're going to have a parliament, and so there's kind of a checks and balances in England. Again, absolute monarchs. I would look at the map to have an understanding of what's occurring in this area. The nation state, the definition of it: common language, culture, national literature, songs, foods, territorial aspects, basically a common allegiance with their history involved with that. And so you're going to see the development of a lot of these states, especially in the Baltic region, and even some of the Slavic regions up north, and a little bit in the Eastern European countries, but they're going to start to get divided off among the main powers. Political patterns, this is the West in 1750. Great change in Central Europe. Frederick the Great of Prussia. You're going to have your religious freedom. State regulates the economy and oversees commercial networks. Prussia is going to be very dominant all the way, well, I wouldn't say dominant all the way, but will be a major player and very influential, leading all the way up into World War I. Continual warfare, France versus Britain, will become a huge rivalry among the seas, and especially over in the colony district areas, over in the Americas, over in the Indian Ocean, with some of the trade being involved with India specifically, and then of course some of the Southeast Asia areas. Prussia versus Austria will become another battle, and that's even going to bring in some of your other powers, with Germany and their alliance with Austria, and France, and the fact that they're not liking Prussia, and then England and France not liking each other. So there's going to be some alliances start to be made here, especially from this point all the way to World War I, kind of flip-flops a little bit, and we'll be studying those. I would have an understanding of how these differences start to develop from this time period on. And of course, a lot of it over territorial conflicts. The Enlightenment thought and popular culture. Scientific revolution leads to the Enlightenment. Scientific methods applied to other fields, philosophy, religion, general principles: people are good, reason the answer, belief in progress, political science, Adam Smith, the laissez-faire, dealing with the economy and the principles in economy and the markets, criminology, society, women's rights, protection of children, attack on inequities. And so basically coming up with better justice as well. Ongoing change in commerce and manufacturing, mass consumerism. Again, this is one reason Portugal and Spain will struggle. They will not have the production like the rest of Europe, and they will be buying more from other parts of Europe. Agriculture will begin to develop during this time period. As I mentioned earlier, all of this kind of getting clumped together with the sciences. Nitrogen fixing crops, coming up better fertilizer, stock breeding, coming up with better animals, swamp drainage, so you're now getting the land to use and getting the nutrients from that. Obviously the potato introduced earlier, we saw that in the Columbian Exchange was introduced back in chapter 15. Domestic system households produced finished goods, so a lot of people becoming entrepreneurs and starting their businesses. Innovation and instability, change becomes the norm. And so while the change does occur, it's good for some. Other people take their risks and fall a little short. And that will conclude chapter 16.